long, long day. I got a lot to say. It feels like I'm carrying a 2-ton weight. I go to see a friend.
Hello, I'm Msgr Patrick Winslow.
And I am Father Matthew Kauth.
And we are speaking from the Rooftop,
A podcast brought to you by 10 Books, in which we invite you to join our conversation out here in the open air,
where we look out upon the world around us from the rooftop of the church and share with you what we see.
Makes me wanna scream from the rooftop to the screen.
Greetings, good Father. Welcome back to the From the Rooftop.
Well, hello. It's been a while.
It has been too long.
I think we have to explain that.
Yeah, I think we had to explain it last time, too.
Yeah, no, but this one was inexcusable.
It's true. I think that perhaps most of you who would know myself or Father Winslow, and certainly anyone that would know the Savoy family, are aware that, of course, we all suffered a great loss this week in the death of Thomas Savoy, who was the Magister Capelle for St. Joseph College Seminary. Prior to that, he was the choir master and director at St. Thomas, and a longtime friend, first of Father Winslow's, and then, of course, of mine as well. I was thinking back, he actually helped me select my very first Mass music back in 2000. Well, that was 2000 flat, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm sure that Tom would not allow you or me to use his passing as an excuse as to why we've been so long delayed in recording these, because that only happened fairly recently. We've been long delayed before then, and that's just a matter of scheduling. We're going to get better at it. We have better equipment now where it's mobile, and we can bring it to wherever we are. So we're going to be better on that one. But going back to the whole Tom front, he's really kind of been, a string in the fabric of my priestly life since the very beginning. As you know, I was ordained in upstate New York, and my very first parish assignment was at a Church of Blessed Sacrament on Central Avenue in Albany. And within a matter of months, there was a change in the music director. The previous music director was leaving, and Tom was hired on board. And that's when I met Tom, his wife, Deborah, and all of the 5 kids. And it was like seeing the Von Trapps show up, at your parish. They were just delightful, such good people. And at that time, I got to know Tom, and he was just he's a big personality, strong, clear views with respect to sacred music that he had really come to honestly by virtue of his work since he was a boy, serving in the life of the church as a young, burgeoning organist, and then eventually, professional musician. And he continued to work in and through the life of the church, in serving as a sacred artist for music and parishes. But he took that so much more seriously than just playing an organ or just showing up and providing music from a hymnal. It was a whole other thing for him. It was tapping into the music tradition of the church and taking the rightful part of sacred music, or at least serving the rightful part of sacred music in the liturgy. And I learned a tremendous amount. And that's when you would come up to visit at some point.
Yes.
And the two of you very quickly started to talk about sacred music. Your mind was on putting together stuff for your first Mass. And if I remember at the time, he was taking pieces from the old Mass, but of course, most of the sacred music was composed to fit the older form of the Mass. And so he was transposing some stuff, that's probably not the right word, but adapting it so that it could be applied to the new form of the Mass, of the 1970 Missal. And so, for example, the memorial acclamation doesn't exist in the old Mass, but it does in the new form of the Mass. And so you would have to contrive musically something to do the memorial acclamation. So he would look to the Gloria or the Kyrie, and he would take the melodic lines, and then he would apply it to the memorial acclamation, that sort of stuff. And I think at the time, when he was doing all of that, that's when you arrived, and you started talking to him, and he really opened up, I think, a great number of possibilities. And I don't know if you used one of the masses that he adapted. Was that the case?
We did not know, but what happened is we were at the anniversary of the feast, I should say, of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. It's where I met him because you were, of course, serving the Carmelite sisters there.
Right.
And Tom was doing the music for that mass.
That was my first anniversary then.
Yes. It was a Lottie mass. And I remember attending the mass, or maybe I can celebrate it, I can't recall, but I just remember all of a sudden I heard this music and I thought, where in the world is this coming from? Because that area of the church's patrimony was largely kept from us insofar as it simply was buried. And I hadn't heard any of it. I got a very small inkling of it at St. Charles Borromeo Seminary. We had a pretty good music program there. And so I began to hear some of it. But when I heard an entire mass done so masterfully, so beautifully, with both chant and polyphony, I was beside myself. And it was one of those experiences we had intellectually with most of the things that we discovered, which was, why did anyone never tell us about this?
Right, exactly.
Where was this my entire childhood? And so I remember saying that at some point you and I came to the conclusion that if we ever had a parish large enough, we would ask Tom to come down because there was just no one like him. I had a priest recently that said something rather beautiful about him. He didn't know him, but he watched him work with our men. And he said he had those huge hands. They did. They were massive.
He was a tall
hands.
man.
Tall man and massive hands like a basketball player. Perfect for a pianist.
Yeah.
And or an organist. And he said, I would watch those hands go out and they'd raise, and almost as if he's the one who did all the flying.
That's right.
With those hands. He would make guys fly. And it's true because we didn't have, and still don't have really, any one particular voice in the seminary that's of lots of education and formation in terms of voice lessons, etc. He takes what he gets and he makes absolute magic out of it.
He's like Rumpelstiltskin. He can take ordinary straw and spin it to gold.
That's it.
I don't know how the rest of that story goes. So if Rumpelstiltskin's like a bad guy, he's not like that. He's the good part that can take straw and make it into gold. Yeah, no, he did. He could take ordinary stuff in ordinary circumstances and deliver gold. Yeah. And you just didn't know how he did it, but somehow he did it. It was really very beautiful. Well, I think we need to transition at some point and talk about how that beautiful sacred music evangelizes the soul. Because then we begin to really understand the important role that sacred musicians like Tom play in the life of the church versus just somebody who comes along and plays a hymn.
Right.
But I would say that we should maybe explain a little bit as to how he came down here.
Sure.
You and I had just come back from further studies, and you were going to live in residence with me at the place where I was going to be a pastor, and I had gotten word that there was a vacancy for the music, that the gentleman was going to move on to another parish. So I knew that I walked in with a pretty large vacancy. I needed to fill it quickly, and I didn't have any real knowledge of the people or anything like that. I just had to kind of walk in cold. So I called Tom, and I say, hey, Tom, I'm looking for a musician. Now, in terms of background, over the course of years, Tom and I would touch base. He would call me or text me periodically about vacancies in the southeast because he knew that at some point he wanted out of the snowy northeast. And so he would see a vacancy wherever they post them and wonder about that, if I knew anything about that priest, if I knew anything about that diocese, if I knew anything about that parish. And I would always reply. And then occasionally I would reach out to Tom and I would say, hey, Tom, I need some help with music. Hey, can you come and do a workshop for us? That kind of stuff. So I knew that in the back of my mind that he had always had an eye toward the south at some point. But you never know if someone's going to pull a trigger like that. You just don't know if it's a dream.
It's a cultural shift. It's a different world being from New York.
It really is in many ways. In many ways. For example, Tom, in his sense of humor, was straight out of New York.
Yeah.
There's nothing we could say. We could not tell you a single joke because all of his jokes would make people blush, which he loved doing. He was like the impish altar boy, right? He's always going to be there. He's going to show up and serve the Mass. But, in the sacristy, he's going to say an off-color joke.
And yet quite devout and pious.
And quite devout and pious, yeah. He had that youthful quality to him. He was both. Yeah. But so I knew this about him, so I said, but I didn't want to presume, because he was the rector, he was the music director and organist for the cathedral.
Right.
Like that's usually considered sort of a pinnacle thing, right? You're the Grand Master in a diocese when you're at the cathedral. So it didn't even occur to me that he would want to come down. So I said, hey, Tom, I need somebody. Can you help me find? I don't need the first thing, the first place to look. How do I even post for this? What do I say? How do I find someone? And he said, well, what are you looking for? And I think he was driving at the time. He said, I said, well, to be quite honest, I'm looking for someone like you. How do I find you? Mm-hmm. And he said, can I call you right back? I said, sure. So I later found out that he pulled the car over. And then he called his wife, Deborah, and they had a quick conversation. So he calls me right back and he said, what about me? I said, what? He said, I would consider doing it. I said, are you kidding? He said, I just got off the phone with my wife. The last children is leaving the house. This is a perfect opportunity. I think we would be up for it. I said, Tom, that would be amazing. I never thought you'd leave the cathedral. I mean, who knew?
Right.
And then one thing led to another, and boy, he's a character. So he fit right in.
And what he did in this diocese, raising the bar so high relative to music, it's one of those things where the tide came in and all the boats got raised.
Well, that's it.
And
I said to him when he came here, I said, Tom, I want you here, but I want you to have an influence.
Yeah.
I said, you've been through many different trends in the life of the church, and you've probably seen it all. You have a very well thought out, informed understanding of sacred music and its role. So I don't want you to be confined to just this parish. To the degree and the extent that you can have an influence in the larger area and in the diocese, please do. Well, that's his nature, right?
Right, absolutely.
Tom is always on the next project. He's composing. He's developing he went from the New York Catholic Chorale to the Carolina Catholic Chorale.
Right.
He's getting out on the radio. He's doing all of his things, and it didn't take long for him to get hooked into your seminary.
Yeah.
And that was a right move.
Deborah had said, to me the other day that this was the greatest move they ever made. It's coming down here. The life of the church, for their lives, it was absolutely hand in glove move. Mm-hmm. So relative, as you say, though, to the nature of music and its importance relative to the sacred liturgy, it's one thing to consider that, historically, the masses were always sung, right? So a spoken mass is kind of a relatively
an aberration,
new thing.
Yeah.
That the Easterns, of course, still sing the mass, and I think in part because historically, whenever you wanted to do something of a high nature, it was lyrical, it was poetic, it was sung, not verse. And there's a number of instances in literature where I was thinking, as you were speaking, not that I wasn't actually paying attention to you, but
that's about right. That's about right.
It struck me.
I return the favor. So
it struck me that both in C.S. Lewis and in Tolkien, in their individual myths, one in the books of Narnia and the other in the Silmarillion, both occasions in which the figure of God is creating something, he does so by singing. And so creation comes forth, as it were, in song, and which is not unlike what we speak about relative to all things are made through the word. We think about a word as spoken, not in some sense a word as sung.
Right.
And even we speak about those beings that are closest to the divine as ones who are constantly engaged in songs of praise, that is to say, the angels.
Absolutely. I remember Thomas said to me, he said, going back to the pages of Genesis, and it says, and God said, let there be. He said, do we really think that he only spoke those? No, he sung them. Which actually, as a scientist, the science part of me resonates with that, because every material object has a what do we call a wave
A
function.
wave sign, yeah.
And the wave function becomes more pronounced the smaller you get. So like you and I as an object have a wave function, but it doesn't really amount to much. Right?
Mine does.
Well, clearly I see you waving
big
around
waves.
Exactly. But if we reduced you in size to the size of an electron, you would behaving in wave-like ways, and which gives you a sense that all the material order, the material world, is predicated on waves to a certain degree. It's woven into the fabric of creation, and so to hear the vibrations and the waves that are created with not just a spoken voice but a sung voice, sort of something very beautiful, waves that are beautiful to the ear to be heard, are those the types that were behind the creative act. I mean, it just it's fitting. Let's put it that way. It's simply
Absolutely.
fitting. I remember when I was a kid, and we would go to church, and there was maybe some conversation, I don't know, about the music at Mass. It wasn't like a common theme, but every now and then someone might mention something. And we would always talk about the music at Mass as something that we like. Oh, I like this one, or I like that one.
Right.
And at the time, it was simply a matter of what I liked. So it could be a melody that I liked. It could be the words that I liked. Ideally, it would be both. It could have been the way it made me feel. It could have been the way in which it inspired me, that sort of thing. And the same thing with my parents. But my dad has by far the worst taste.
Well, in all things, really.
Well, in all things, yeah. No. He has that kindergarten romper room taste.
Yeah, he likes it. I
and
think
he
when it's
embraces
fun.
it wholeheartedly, without doubt. But that's where he is. That's where he is. So that said, the rest of us had only mildly more elevated views. Not much beyond that. I remember hating the organ. I thought the organ was just loud and obnoxious and just grating. And I remember telling that to Tom, and he looked at me like I just hurt him.
Sure.
He looked at me like I just. But of course, there is a difference between someone who can play the organ and somebody who just hammers the organ,
or that accordion sound of a bad organ, which just a sort of reverberation,
like an ice rink.
Oh, it's horrible.
And it was, and that's kind of what we had at our parish. But the thing is, the standards by which we were measuring were all self-referential. And not that that I don't continue to be somewhat self-referential, but I've been formed, and having been formed, what suits the liturgy, in my estimation, in sacred music, is an altogether different reality. What I would have said as a 13-year-old and what I would say now are totally, totally different.
Well, there's an old line from Beethoven, right, when he says, asks the question of a confrere, what does music do? And then the confrere says it elevates the soul, which is probably the common response of someone going to Mass saying, I want to elevate the soul, etc. And Beethoven's response was, I think, rather accurate. He just said, it does whatever I darn well please. Because it has that pernicious capacity to sort of get underneath the door of reason and get right to the passions. It can, as he said, if I want you to march, you're going to march. If I want you to be quiet, you'll be quiet. The formative capacity of music to such an extent that Plato didn't want the state to be able to control music because it had such an effect on the passions of the listener. And I think that's true. And I think in large degree, what you and I respond to, especially when we're younger, to the songs we like or the songs we don't like, have high levels of emotional content to them, which is the reason that when people, as you and I laugh about so many times, when you get ready for a funeral and you ask the family, what would you like in terms of the music? And they say, we want it to be traditional. Then they name the songs that to them are traditional, which are like How Great Thou Art. And all these songs that I think have absolutely no objective quality about them whatsoever that is good. But they have an emotional connection to them.
They're nostalgic.
Because that was the song they played when Grandma died.
That's right.
Right? And so your emotions grab onto them, which is not the same thing as it being objectively beautiful.
No, but that's what happens in movies.
Absolutely.
Right? You use music. Do you ever have a movie on and maybe turn down the volume? It goes flat.
Yeah, it goes flat.
The whole thing goes flat.
Yeah. I have a constant theme and score in the back of my mind just for my own life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very dramatic, my music. Full of French horns.
I wouldn't even ask what was playing when you came into the building. It's true. It does grab a hold of you. We are subject to its powers. And precisely, I think the point that you're making is that when it's used in a liturgical setting, it needs to be discerned. Mm-hmm. In what way is it moving you? And at what moment?
Right.
And that is a very impactful. I would say that even as a kid, I would have reacted very positively to the sound of Gregorian chant. I have never encountered a person that didn't find Gregorian chant to be moving.
If it's done right, because it can be deathly.
Well, no, I don't mean, yes, I mean if it's done properly. So remember when I was in college, I took a music course, and we had to study Gregorian chant. Back then, you'd have to go to the library, and the chant was all on big records, and you had to. It wasn't even a cassette
Didn't make it
form.
to the 8 tracks.
No, not at all. So they were on the big record, and we had to listen, and we had to take certain notes, and so we had samples, and you could go and you could bring your own cassette, and you could record it and then take it with you. And so I remember I had that, and I put it in the car. I put it on the car with my parents, and they're like, "Whoa, this is beautiful! Everyone had the same reaction. Of course, it was being done properly, like the monks of Silos.
Right. It was the monks of Silos. It went crazy, that monastery.
The chant album, where everybody responded to it because it is so moving.
Yeah.
And moving in such a right way, it does the work.
Yeah, the aorist synthesis, as Tom would say, that sort of wave-like quality, as you were saying earlier, and the moda voce, where you swell up and then your voice sort of dies down. It has to maintain a certain amount of life. If it's just sort of flat, like anything else, right? It destroys the thing.
Yeah, no.
It's actually really hard to do right.
It is.
But when it is done right, it's done in the situation of a community that has been praying it for a long time and checking themselves on their singing. And I think that if I could recall one thing that Tom really taught me about the transition from secular, popular, emotionally based music to that, it was a time I had him come into the high school. And I asked, because I was so fascinated by chant, by polyphony, what have you, and proper music, and it had so formed me at that point in my life that, of course, at the high school they had guitars and bongos and various things, and it's a gym mass, right? You can't really do anything proper in a gym musically. But nevertheless, I asked them to come in, and I realized that what they were doing was good music, but the students at that point couldn't receive it. There is a certain amount of education that takes place with being able to appreciate this, that, or the other, like in anything in life, because beauty is something that an appreciation of beauty actually has to be cultivated intellectually. In fact, we speak about beauty only in reference to the two senses that are most closely united or connected to the intellect. That is to say, sight and sound. We don't say that the pizza that you're eating is beautiful. It might look really great, but that'd be sight, not taste.
Right.
Like we don't say that smells are beautiful.
Right.
The ones that are most clearly united to the intellect, we talk about beauty, this arresting quality of things. And I was doing some reading recently on that topic, and it struck me, I didn't realize this before, but the very word for beauty, one of the words for beauty in Greek that is mostly aligned with the word for good as well, kind of interchangeable, comes from the Greek verb kaleo, which means to call. That's something that the word for beauty has that nature of a call, and it's what it does. It sort of hails you out of yourself. Yeah, that's the line from. There's a line from Shakespeare that said, "How is it possible that sheep's guts could hail souls out of men's bodies?" Meaning the strings of the violin. How is that possible? And I love to play the violin. I'm not sure my playing has ever done anything but made everyone leave the room. But when you listen to a fantastic violin, it does. It rips you out of yourself.
Right. Yeah, you know, there are many things that are beautiful. For example, I love a good singer-songwriter song with an acoustic guitar.
Sure.
And I would even say that's beautiful. Yet at the same time, just because something is beautiful doesn't mean it does serves the mission of sacred music at a mass.
Right.
You know, you can have something that's quite beautiful, but it just doesn't. It's just not meant for the mass. The mass has a role for the music to play.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but my father was a deacon. He passed in 2005, and when he used to do the adoration at the parish, he was in charge of the adoration. Well, he liked certain songs, and so he made this cassette tape of all the songs he liked, and so everyone that went to adoration had to listen to my dad's top 10 list.
Boy,
and some of the songs were just movie scores.
No. See, yes.
So I learned to pray for the Blessed Sacrament
with like Braveheart in the background. Yeah, no. I mean, I get it. You know, some things are beautiful, but they're not right.
It doesn't.
And I remember, it was Benedict XVI, and he wrote in the Spirit of Liturgy on the topic of music. He spoke about certain qualities of sacred music, and he came up with this paradoxical phrase that I thought was beautiful. He called it sober inebriation.
Oh, yes, I love that phrase. I've used it many times since you pointed it out to me.
Isn't it stunning? I mean, wow, what a thought. Sober inebriation. You know, there's that sense of rationality and emotion.
Yeah.
But you can't become so emotional, so inebriated that you lose all rationality, which sometimes you get with the bongos and
that's
the electric guitars.
Right? That's why you have it you don't have an organ typically at a football game.
No, you don't. Right, exactly, because you're kind of jumping right to the big emotional. But at the same time, there are times when you tone down the affect and emotion, and it's very sober. Lent, Good Friday. That's why you subdue the organ, you kill the bells, things of that nature. And but yet you're never so sober that it lacks some inebriation to move the spirit, and you're never so inebriated that you lack this rationality, this tethering to sobriety, because the two have to be interconnected. And yet we have seen, both of us have actually probably been in occasion where it's tipped too far to one or the other, where it's become so sober, it's so drony that it's like dirgy, sad. It just doesn't, and it's not one of those times when you would want to tip in that direction. And then the same thing with the inebriation, probably felt more often, where like, you know, you're there, you said the words of consecration, then, you know, you say Mysterium Fidei, or you chant, you know, the mystery of faith, and then suddenly someone comes in with some massive clanging sounds.
I know.
You know.
The contrast is horrible.
Oh my gosh.
It shocks you out of your contemplative stance.
It's just so dissonant.
Yeah.
To what you're doing at the altar. It's just shocking. And that is a type of inebriation that does not belong at that moment.
I don't get inebriated. I just get sick.
Well, it's just so dissonant to the moment. Yeah, it's so sacred music, when used properly, this beauty, it is so powerful. And I think that you and I saw cases, especially here at St. Thomas in Charlotte, North Carolina, where his music had a powerful evangelical effect. It moved people. It wasn't just that it gave them a moment, if you will, but it actually had an effect on their lives.
Yeah.
They touched something sacred. They felt something sacred, and they wanted more of it. When you tasted it, you wanted more. And of course, a true desire, an authentic desire for the sacred, moves one to become better, right? You want to draw closer to God. You want more of that.
If I'm imbued with that which is noble, I want myself to be noble.
Mm-hmm. And I can't get closer apart from changing myself.
Exactly.
Or
I just drag the music down so I don't have to worry about it. Right? I mean, that's just it, which is exactly what we've done in large degree with the liturgy. Not necessarily intentionally, but that's exactly what we've done.
Well, but for the sacred artists that are out there, especially now experiencing the loss of Tom in the fabric of our community, whether it's the seminary or whether it's the parish or the diocese, you realize how much of a contribution that people like this make to our spiritual lives. And, you appreciate it when it's gone more.
Yeah.
Not that we didn't appreciate it at the time, because every time we went, it would be, that was beautiful, that was extraordinary, that was so moving. But now that you're not going to show up on a Sunday or show up to a sacred Vespers or something along those lines and hear,
right.
It's hard. The upside is because he was a teacher and he has had this influence on seminarians and priests, what he has set in motion now has a life of its own.
Yeah, it's been unleashed. It lives inside of these
men.
men.
You see that.
Absolutely, you do. As a matter of fact, they're all coming back today, to be a part of the funeral rites, etc. And that's one thing they've said to me, to a man, that what he gave us, we will not drop. So. Oh
boy. Well, the reality is you and I could eulogize this man and then spin off on all sorts of beautiful themes, themes that he would love right now to be discussing.
Absolutely.
He was passionate about, but we're grateful to him. We love him dearly and his family. And we have every confidence that as he draws to the light of God, that he will continue to have an influence on the church in all the best ways. And we ask him to watch over so many of our men that he had influence in shaping their musical formation.
Well said. Amen to that. We'll catch you all next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Makes me wanna scream from the rooftop to the screen.
Thanks for listening to this episode of From the Rooftop.
For updates about new episodes, special guests, and exclusive deals for From the Rooftop listeners, sign up at rooftop.podcast.com.
And remember, for more great ways to deepen your faith, check out all the spiritual resources available at tanbooks.com.
And we'll see you again next time
From the Rooftop.